This is about a Vietnam vet who died in a Good Samaritan act. He was pulled over on the Pacific Coast Highway helping somebody with a stalled car, and he was smashed from behind after surviving the Vietnam War and being an open-minded guy by a moving van. He had bought 5 acres in Mount Shasta, and that's how he's died. The narrator's a work of fiction. He's kind of a blend of me and my friend who knew him well and who taught me how to sail. This is the story of one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met. He was someone I had the pleasure of knowing in my slightly wayward youth, a loyal friend and travel companion, someone you could count on whenever the chips were down. We first met in Ventura, California, the rainy spring of 1984, working construction during the day. Then later on, as Fitzgerald learned to trust me after my own loyalty had been eked out and earned, we would talk for hours at the local marina. Robert Fitzgerald was an expert sailor, an open water navigator, a carpenter by trade, a plumber and an electrician who spoke fluent Spanish plus some fair Italian, a shade tree mechanic and jack of all trades par excellence. He was well-traveled, both continental and Pacific Rim, supremely curious and prodigiously busy. He was a 103rd Airborne ex-soldier turned neo-remarque pacifist, a veteran of what he often adamantly referred to as the American War against the diverse geographical and cultural region known as Vietnam. He was Defense Language Institute trained in Monterey, among other places, so he spoke some Vietnamese as well. He stood 5'7" and weighed around 160. Fitzgerald had this calm but ever attentive, always arresting gaze, brightly colored, inwardly lit gold eyes, very light brown with fleckings of amber. Once I found him sitting in his pint-sized Datsun pickup reading a textbook on calculus, riveted by, zeroing in on it, scratching around the margins with a chewed-up pencil. "Why in the world are you reading that?" I asked him. "Because I never learned before," Fitzgerald told me. This was his quick, no-frills response. He lived and worked out of that Datsun pickup for years, then slept at night in an 8x6 wooden toolbox he had built near the local marina. This toolbox had been his home for goodness knows how long. Just a waterproof wooden box, a poncho liner, and a pillow. He kept a ragged North Face sleeping bag nearby just in case the temperature should drop. Everything else, all of Fitzgerald's books, a few family and combat photographs, select letters, and so forth, he carefully organized and placed in storage. Every spare minute, every spare cent went into his current sailboat in progress, the Chofusa. This was one of the sailboats that would change things in ways too complex for me to quickly communicate. It was a 32-foot, exquisitely hand-built beauty, which he skimped and saved for and slowly brought to life. I should mention that if nothing else tonight, go online and check out Ezra Pound's translation from the Chinese of The River Merchant's Wife. That's where the sailboat names come from. For about 2 years, we remained good friends. Then Robert Fitzgerald turned up dead, so that was that. One day, he was irrevocably gone, thus ending our friendship, except for these good memories, thus ending his quasi-charmed, geared to his own time life after he'd made it through a typhoon off the northeast coast of Australia, another man-killer storm in the Caribbean, and the surreally horrific Battle of Dak To. That's right, November 1967. Of course, if you're a sentient witness to those troubled times and its alchemy of issues, if you're not allergic to history, then perhaps you have an idea about just what this means. The battle fought for Hill 875 had one of the most tragic instances of friendly fire during our entire involvement. The firefight at Dak To was a pivotal moment for many forever brave and forever dead young men, many so-called theorists of the limited war, and dozens of still surviving American soldiers. However, as anyone who actually lived the war knows all too well, any pivotal moment in Vietnam didn't change that much, or change it nearly soon enough. The French had their tragedies at Haiphong, Quang Bao, Dien Bien Phu, and we learned well from their catastrophes, which cut both ways. Next, we had a long list of our own. The battle at Dak To was a turning point in a war replete with so many turning points, they form a monotonous, dizzying gyre. Bien Wow, Ap Bac, Pleiku, Song Bi, the various battles at Hue, the bad trip standoff at Quezon, and the lie-filled massacre of innocents at My Lai. Let me be the first to say that I didn't have one blessed clue about what Vietnam or any other war was like, and I still don't. I was born in 1960, so I spent the early part of the decade eating Captain Crunch and Pop-Tarts, and occasionally peeing in my bed at night. Other things on TV commanded my toddler than my adolescent attention. I ignored the combat footage and stayed glued to Gilligan's Island. I watched Star Trek and Lost in Space from behind my mother's knees while she ironed the family clothes, getting a cheap rush of outer space danger and scary stuff from between my fingers. Go ahead and laugh. That wavy armed robot really gave me the willies. By the time I turned 10, other things like riding my dirt bike, and then later on Pac-Man, commanded my time. No sir, no ma'am, I didn't have an inkling. Not until I hit 23 and ended up in Ventura, California, where Robert Fitzgerald generally befriended me and taught me some things, partly by putting me in my place. He taught me how to sail and invited me to the South Pacific to help repair a hurricane-damaged boat. He talked to me forthrightly about his combat experience. Really talked, mind you. No holds barred, no swinging dick tall tales. But this guy was dauntless, I'm telling you. Not nuts or berserk or super macho. He was just always thoroughly engaged, no matter what he was doing, and in love with life down to its last drop, fascinated by all of its kaleidoscopic particulars. Once we were at sea in the Fiji Island group when this vicious thunderstorm came out of nowhere, and there we were, off Malolalailai, maybe half a mile from a waterspout, this freaking tornado full of salt water. Let me assure you that I was scared and trembling, yet Robert Fitzgerald was genuinely unafraid in a wide-eyed, stoic, uncocky way which this particular war had taught him, and this was the general attitude he had managed to bring back home. But how did the USA end up over there anyway? Talk about an oil drum size full of slick and wriggling worms. Perhaps any point of origin is something hard to determine. Any eschatology is also flawed, ultimately doomed to failure. Consequently, how to begin and end this story, which comprises American politics and culture as a whole, stems from our habits, practices, and beliefs, and ultimately also the tailor of the tale. How to separate being from becoming. When did you start to be the person you are or aren't right now? When does a good marriage begin to fade? When does a star begin to become a black hole? Robert Carlton Fitzgerald was originally from Fairfield, Connecticut. He was born in 1947 and was an only child. His mother worked as a registered nurse, and his father was a dabbler. According to Fitzgerald, his old man was a real piece of work, somewhat of a ne'er-do-well, possibly a genius in his own way, officially an inventor by trade. Ever known one personally? Someone who makes his living on patents? Well, that's what his father did. And apparently Robert's childhood was typical enough, fairly comfortable economically, although there were some tight times. He was publicly educated. His mother and his father were both big readers who instilled a lexical appreciation at an early age. Also, they both loved the sea. While he was growing up, Fitzgerald's parents had a Morgan 38, which they kept docked in a rimmed slip at Stonington, a coastal town in eastern Connecticut with a deep harbor and an open view of the Atlantic. They would go out there most Saturdays, even if it was just to sand or paint something on the sailboat or generally clean up around the dock. His parents loved each other. They both liked their jobs. His mother worked in the local Catholic hospital. His father kept his own odd hours. On the weekends, though, ocean winds and swells permitting, the three of them would sail. His mother would pack a picnic lunch with garlic and rosemary roasted chicken, maybe a bottle of chilled Chardonnay. His father would have maybe a few beers tops. His father could be quite wacky, though, moody and unpredictable. I could tell you some of the things he invented. Those ceramic fittings for halogen bulbs, a type of backing for adhesive tape, an innovative fiber used in most air conditioning and heating filters. Also, I could tell you about the job he had working for a company that implanted specks of gamma-sensitive material inside of human skeletons. Sounds wild, right? Maybe so, but no less true. This company in Stamford, Connecticut, prepared the skeletons into human facsimiles, then sold them to medical schools and military developers. The skeletons were real, mind you. They came in burlap bags from Bombay, another haughty gift, if not a gratuity, from the so-called third world to the sunny future of the so-called first and foremost.